Okay. So I'm Daniel Bejar, and we're sitting in my studio in Bushwick, Brooklyn.
Can you give me some background into your practice as an artist? You know, how did you come to calling yourself an artist?
Well, I've always been drawing, and I guess, yeah, making things since I can remember. And it was I was always gonna be either an artist or a baseball player, and yeah, that didn't work out. So yeah, I went to art college.
Where are you from?
And I was born in the Bronx,
Okay.
in New York. Yeah.
Okay.
But I grew up in Florida, and then after undergrad, I moved back to New York.
Okay.
And then, yeah, here we are.
And received a BFA and an MFA?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And what kind of work were you making? You said you started off drawing and things like this. So how did you come to making the work that you're doing now?
It's a good question. Well, I've always been a drawer and a painter, and my undergrad was in illustration, which I still do. It's my day job, and also funds these other projects. But you know, aside from doing you know, illustration, I've always, since as early as I can remember, been making things that were, I guess, socially conscious, I would say, and I guess from early on I knew like this wasn't a very viable way to, you know, support yourself or make a living, but it's always been very, it's felt to me as I want to say my duty, and I guess, yeah, as an artist, to make this work, and it's really the only work I know how to make, I would say. So it's always been made, I want to say not in the background, but, you know, I've always made it, and it's just, I guess, continually evolved, you know, to where it is now. Yeah.
So you mentioned the word, or the phrase, socially conscious. What does that mean to you?
To me, socially conscious means being aware of what is happening in current events, socially, economically, politically, because these are the forces that kind of, I don't want to say control, or basically dictate, you know, society in a way. And I guess, yeah, it's, I think art is a great way to affect those things. But a great way is also, I don't want to say not my only way, or the way I choose to try to affect those issues. But yeah, things that are affecting people in a broader context.
So as an artist, how do you engage in those things, in politics and current events?
Well, I mean, for me, I think I pick it up, or I go, I want to say attack those things, but
You can say that.
or target those things through ideas of history and memory, you know, and identity, because these are things that I think it was, I don't know who said it, but I may have read it in Walter Benjamin, but it's the winners write history. So there is this idea of the people in power who are writing history, dictating it, and if you go back and really look, you know, and Benjamin says, you know, you have to brush history against the grain, you know, and I see that as that's my duty. That's to brush history against the grain. So kind of, yeah, to really peel back or read between the lines, you know, what's been written, and yeah, kind of explore unresolved histories, you know.
And why do you think something like the work that you're doing needs to be done?
Well, because if there's something that doesn't really, I won't say pan out, or doesn't look or smells fishy, you know, it needs to be, you know, looked at, and people need to know the truth or an alternative. You know, I see art as a good way to propose an alternative to what has been presented in society.
Who or what is the ideal audience for your work?
Ideal audience is...
Do you have you thought about this? You know, who do you make for?
I make for everybody. I make for me, and I make for everybody. I mean, because if you think about it, like, the public is, you know, it's me, you, it's everybody, and it's a bigger stage than, you know, a white cube. And I think if you're gonna affect social change, you have to do it there. If it ends up in the cube, the white cube, then that's great, but you know, I think that's where it starts or begins, the public, which is a space that's being contested more and more every day.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a good arena.
And so you conceptualize the public as what necessarily? Is this notion of public, is it something that shifts contextually?
Yeah, the public can be space, it can be people, societies, but it is, it's open, it's where people have access to, you know, there is no discrimination of, you know, there's no, you know, income, you know, that says you have to be here to get into this, to look at this, you know, it's yeah, just flatten that line out, and, you know, everyone's on the same level. Yeah.
And so what is the public response to your work? Have you devised a way of evaluating?
No, I mean, I think I haven't devised a way. I mean, aside from me sitting there and watching, you know, which is a little creepy, I think people think it's funny, or some of the projects I think are funny, because I think I tend to use, some would say humor, but humor is a good, you know, way to get in. No, but I mean, I think, like, the things I do in public, they're, you know, there's, my name isn't on it. It's very anonymous. You know, I'm not really interested in, I don't want to say recognition, or like, oh, you know, like my tag is on it or something. I'm not interested in that. For instance, like the Get Lost project, there's no name, there's no anything to trace back. Discover, same thing, there's no name. In this project, there's going to be no name, there's nothing really on it to connect it back to me. Because I think there's something that happens, you know, when you put your name on something, there's some sort of like owning, like, and I'm not really interested in owning. So it's, and it also draws it back to you, and that's, I wanted to just talk to, you know, the audience. And not about me.
I think you bring up two really great points, and you mentioned anonymity, which is something I like to talk a little bit more about, and then also ownership. And it seems like you set them up almost as like a dichotomous terms in a way. So I'm interested in to hear you speak about how anonymity functions for you, how you use that, everything. Do you think that would be a...
I'm on camera now.
Right. So that's,
yeah.
Just
yeah. Game over.
Game over. Is that a methodology?
I don't know if it's a methodology, but I think, you know, if you look at the history of, like, graffiti or something, like it is, you know, very much rooted in this idea of it's a tag, it's your name, it's your ownership. This is mine. This is my space. This is my, you know, this is my tag. You know, don't tag over it. You know, and like if you see something, you're like, oh, it's a Banksy or something. You know, it's because there's a name on it. It's like a Chanel bag or something, or like a Louis Vuitton. You know, there's
branding.
Right. And I'm not really, you know, interested in that, because I think, yeah, I don't know, because I think that's the first step towards this, you know, I don't want to say commercialization of this idea of like branding. And I think, like I mentioned before, like once a name is on it, like, you know, you're drawing connection to yourself, the work, and then people start to make associations. So, oh, who's this? Why is he doing it? You know, what's his agenda? You know, like, you know, once you separate that, you know, you kind of, it's just the piece that's talking to the people, or just talking, or hopefully talking. I mean, it may not talk at all.
Yeah.
But for me, that anonymity provides that space to, yeah, separation.
Well, you know, you talk about graffiti and tagging, and I think about that as, you know, kind of like a form of rebellion, of bringing voice to a person who may feel as if, you know, otherwise they would be voiceless, or being able to claim, you know, something that is not yours as a means of just kind of, you know, rebelliously intervening on something, and really challenging the notion of private property and ownership in that way as well. Right. But I'm thinking perhaps there's a sign of the times now where there's this oversaturation of images and of ideas and information, that I wonder if perhaps you've thought about this anonymity as a kind of rebellion against that.
That's a good point too. Yeah, no, definitely. Like it's, yeah, like I think I mentioned before, like once you start using the name, like then you're on your way to, you know, a brand or something. And I mean, I think maybe, yeah, I think you're definitely right. It's definitely a rebellion against that. And yeah, I think thinking about it in that way, I think like everything I do is pretty much a rebellion.
You just figured it out.
Yeah, right.
But you also use your name as well, right? I mean, you have these different ways of kind of taking on this anonymous persona.
True, yes. And the Google Ganger is definitely...
Right.
Unfortunately, I had to use my face and my name.
So let's talk about that, how you approach this removal, you know, removing of identity, or removing of, you know, the brand of a name by using a name, and how the Google Ganger project allows you to do that. That project was strictly a result of me getting intercepting a fan mail. So I mean, like I never set out to do that, you know. But once I started receive that first fan mail and started receiving more, you know, I thought about the best way to, you know, deploy the project. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, I came to the conclusion that it had to be me, my face, and my name on the internet, which is like, I'm a super private person. So like, it was like super hard to do that, unfortunately. But I mean, like it was for me, it was the best solution. So it was, I mean, it's not something I wanted, but it, you know, it had to be done. So yeah, it's but it's a complete opposite of being anonymous. But yeah. And what kind of, you know, like, what did you learn from allowing yourself to be online in that way? Because you were kind of yourself, but then not really.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I learned.
What is it kind of, how did it inform your notions of publicness or publicity?
Well, I mean, for me, like the site of the internet is just like the site of, you know, say like Central Park or something. It is a public space.
Mm-hmm.
Like the internet is, you know, one of the great contemporary creations where it is public. I mean, right now there are laws that are in Congress that are trying to remove that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So it is a site of contention. It's and it needs to stay public. I mean, because it allows the ability to alter. It's, you know, so for me, like, it's a public space, and like this, it's something we all share.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and if you think about, you know, the internet is essentially a contemporary. It's an archive. You know, if in the sense of like an old library. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the library, I guess, of our society, you know, heading, you know, moving forward. So this was kind of like my little attempt to, you know, change history, more or less a personal history. But this is, you know, because once something goes on a Google servers, it's kind of there forever. So it was a kind of a way of like, well, it's almost like tagging, because I was kind of claiming that space back to me in a sense. So there's a push and pull between, you know, anonymity and, you know, claiming. Yeah.
Is the internet your primary source for gathering information for the projects that you want to embark on?
Oh yeah. I spend probably an unhealthy amount of time on the internet. Yeah.
And you know, I often wonder, as I think a lot about the body, you know, particularly with this project and thinking about ideas of social engagement. And for me, I just really want to kind of whittle it down to the interaction between people.
Right.
And so that the artist is really kind of doesn't see themselves necessarily as, you know, intervening into the social, because the artist is already considers himself a part of that. So that is the medium by which they're working.
Right.
You know, so almost that distinction between artist and individual, like you were saying, is almost eliminated in a way. But I'm interested in what happens to bodies in virtual spaces, and you know, where the sense of the individual, you know, the relationships between, say, yourself and another individual. How do you think about the notion of the body or the interaction between you and other people online? Is it different from relationships that are established offline?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I have very many like digital relationships online, or like, I mean, aside from like your regular Facebook and, you know, Twitter and things like that.
Does it feel like, is the internet a social space in that way?
It's definitely a social space. I mean, there is like a culture of sharing. It's a very generous space. So and I really like that about you know, the internet. Is a very, you know, sharing is a very, you know, been doing it forever, but it's like, I think it's just inherent in, you know, relationships, and I think on the internet, you know, like things have a tendency to become viral, and I think, you know, and I mean, you can see in terms of like web art nowadays, like there is this tendency for like people to try to make things go viral. So like you can see like a trend of like pushing things to go viral, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or bad. You know, I think if it does, it should go on its own merit. But there's this like creating work to be viral, like with this intention of you know.
It's kind of a mass.
Yeah. But I mean, if that's part of the project, then great. But like this idea of just to like, I don't know. Yeah. It's tricky space.
Yeah. You know, I'm just wondering if your experience of being online is more of a private experience than it is about, you know, you kind of engaging with, or at least having the idea that you're engaging with, you know, however many millions of other people who are also online at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, the project utilizes that function of the internet. Like, it's a very public and, you know, sharing. So like the project kind of utilizes those tools which are already inherent in that space.
Right.
So that was like, you know, very intentional, like as the site that I chose to, you know, make the project. But yeah, I think that's just part of the beast, you know. Yeah.
I think for sure, like the concept of identity shifts when you're online.
Right.
And I think that Google Ganger exemplifies that very well.
Right.
And I know that identity and the notions of kind of transgressing borders is a large part of what it is that motivates you to work.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear about, you know, what you're thinking about identity, or you know, how this concept plays out for you.
Yeah.
You know, when you're online.
Yeah.
And when you kind of come up against other Daniel Bejars.
Well, I mean, identity for me, I mean, it's something that's very, I don't know, I've always thought about it. I mean, like, it's always been in the back of my head just because I think of my experience, my like multicultural experience, you know, parents were born in Puerto Rico, but you're born in the States, so you kind of have this, and there's this sense of never, I don't want to say feeling settled in either culture, or so you kind of like occupy this, you know, middle point in a way, which is kind of like why I went to the halfway point between the U.S. and Puerto Rico. But so for me, that's always been, you know, always been part of my experience. So, and I don't know, I mean, you know, I think about a lot about what's in a name, or, you know, and then the fan mail started coming in, and it's just kind of like fed into, you know, what is in a name. You know, a name is just a label, you know, or it's just something that's given, you know, it's not really your name, you know, it's what you do. So yeah, so this, you know, when the other Daniel Bejar showed up, who's a musician, you know, it was a good opportunity or for the internet. I mean, I saw it as like a space that me and him are gonna occupy for the rest of our lives. So that's, you know, we share it. And, you know, it was an attempt to reclaim, maybe like a tagging or something. But the idea of creating confusion or blurring, like saying, what is Daniel Bejar? What is, it's two words, you know what I mean? Like diluting that, and then, you know, that's gonna further get diluted with this next project that I'm working on now, with the Gaddafi thing. Once those images go on too, so it just adds to this dilution in a sense. But it's just happening in a very public space. So yeah, names are, yeah, I think a lot about names, yeah.
So we're having this conversation because of this name, social engagement.
Right, right.
Right. And I'm curious to know what you think about that. I mean, I feel like this is something that's coming up a lot. And see, in 2006, when I was leaving graduate school, there was an MFA that was cropping up in social practice.
Right.
You know, so artists can now start to kind of work in this space that was like in between curatorial work and visual, you know, like studies.
Right.
Visual criticism, and then became this MFA. And I was always like, felt like I was 2 years too late.
Right.
But since like 2006, the first time I had ever heard of something like this, and then for it to be professionalized in a way where you can get a degree in it.
Right.
But it's something that has really taken hold and continues to grow.
Yeah.
And it's really, these are forces out there that really want to make space for it within contemporary art practice.
Right.
So I just want to know what you think about this idea.
Yeah. Social engagement. No, I mean, I think it's definitely, I don't want to say a sign of the times, but it's definitely, I mean, I feel that it's, I don't want to say a trend, but more and more people are working in that space, and I think it's you know, there's, I mean, could be, you know, the history of art. I mean, there's something, you know, that from the 80s where it was just, you know, sell, the 90s, like there is this maybe like this divorcing of, hey, we got to get back to, I don't want to say roots, but some real situations or something. But I mean, yeah, and I mean, and especially with the whole, you know, the stock market crash and, you know, the whole bank bailout thing, I think that affects, you know, a lot of the way people think or are making work. And, you know, people realize that maybe something has to change. Like, you know, I mean, I think the art market, you know, maybe slowed down for a little bit, but it was like back to the same old thing afterwards. Yeah, it's, you know, a different approach to making art, and I think it speaks to where we're at. Like, there is a pushback to the way things were, which I think is great, and is the right direction. But yeah.
A pushback to the way things were, in what sense?
Maybe about making things that mean something, you know, that can affect social change, that do, that you're not making something for a dollar sign. Like there is, you know, there's something real in the impetus to make the thing, you know, there's a problem, we're gonna, you know, try to affect it. You know, through art, and I think that's, you know, that's happening now, which is good. I mean, you look at the, you know, the revolutions that are happening, you know, like all these things are, there is this, you can kind of sense it there. I mean, the Occupy movement, there is this very, I don't want to say a push, but, you know, like, I want to say things are waking up in a sense, and I think the internet has a lot to do with that too. You know, there is this idea of sharing information. People have access to information now. Well, not everybody, but you know, more and more people.
That's right.
So, you know, and information is power. So the more people have, then, you know, it's gonna, you know, yeah. So hopefully it keeps going, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be something that's born of necessity, right?
Yeah.
So then I wonder, you know, I don't necessarily think it's anything new per se,
right.
You know, this notion, but I definitely think that it is being, there's a lot of energy in trying to articulate what the aesthetics of something like social engagement is.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about value because you brought that up. And I think oftentimes when someone is working in this way, in a socially conscious or socially engaged way,
yeah.
that you often find yourself in conversations where people are like, well, is it art or is it real? I mean, I have.
Yeah.
I have often
Yeah.
heard that.
That's weird. I've never heard that.
Yeah. Yes.
What does real mean?
Well, what does art mean then?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, for me, I've always taken the position that, I mean, art is real. Like, I don't know how.
Yeah.
How it wouldn't. But I think where that comes from is that if art has a physical effect, a tangible effect, right? Let's say you use the word tangible on another person's life, then it becomes more real and less about art.
Yeah.
What do you think about that distinction? Because then I wonder what the value of art is.
For me personally, I think that's maybe a very an older way of thinking, you know, or a traditional way, I should say. You know, that to hold something means it's real, you know. Like, I mean, for me personally, like, an idea is real. Like, you know, we can talk and have a conversation, which is real. You know, like, there is this idea of, yeah, ideas, you know, like, what's in my head, that's real, you know. And I think we have to move beyond that. That notion of, you know, this cup is real, or, you know, what I see in front of me is real, you know, like, because a lot of the times it's not real, you know, like, you know, it's all, you know, facade.
Yeah, well,
yeah, everything. Reality, yeah.
All intents and purposes is an illusion.
Right.
You know, everyone's reality is different.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I would lean towards anything can be real, or yeah, everything's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, what's the value? What's the value in art?
I think the value in art is you're giving something to culture, society. You're giving an idea. You are giving something, you know, back that wasn't there before. And once it's out in the world, and it, you know, whatever it is, it's, you know, that's the value. You are adding to your culture, and you know, that's what I aim to do. Yeah.
And so now I wonder if there's a reciprocity there, you know, in that giving, and that, you know, adding to the continuum that is culture.
Yeah.
What are you receiving?
What am I receiving back?
Yeah. What are you taking back from that contribution?
That's a good question. I don't know, for me, like, it's just, I don't know what else to do, so, like, for me, like, I have to do it. But if it's, I don't know, I think if it's, I don't want to say makes an effect, because, you know, like I said, I'm not, like, sitting there and looking and waiting for people's reaction. You know, I don't really know, but the hope is that it just, you know, provides an opportunity to think maybe there's a different way, or, you know, so that's the hope. It's like to say, oh, what is this? To question, just to question what has been presented, like, and if that happens, then that's great. That's all I'm asking. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to return to the exchange or the relationship between you and the public. Do you feel as if you are creating spaces for exchange, or what does that the notion of exchange mean for you in your practice?
Mm-hmm. You mean like exchange in the context of, I make this, and what do I receive in return? Or
well, you seem like you approach it differently, I feel like, in each iteration. Like for instance, in the Google Ganger project, you create a form of exchange or a form of interaction between yourself as Daniel Bejar and then the musician Daniel Bejar. And I don't know if the two of you have ever had any kind of interaction between each other.
Yeah, no.
You see what I mean? So like, I'm interested in that kind of, it's almost like an exchange that hits a limit. Like there's like a limit to it. It almost like falls. It's like it gets really close to this intersection, but then
pulls back.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like for instance, for like that project, I mean, I did have the opportunity to meet him, but I declined. Like for me, it was just like important to keep, a subjectivity to the whole thing. Like it would be like if I met him, like I won't say I would feel bad for what I'm doing, but like in some sort of like moral, dilemma. But if I met him, I don't know, it would just. Yeah, I just wanted to keep it very separate, and it's really not about him, It just, it's this idea about names and and doppelgangers. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the Romney?
Yeah,
because you're going to the Republican.
Yes. Yeah.
Part of that. So I really am curious to hear how you will interact with those folks down there.
I mean, well, that project's called Recollections. So what I was doing was, collecting like historical residue from old campaign posters and presenting them back in the context of the 2012 election. But yeah, I honestly don't know the reaction, what I would get. I mean, because I'm going to be there, but I'm not going to be inside of the convention, because like you have to be a Republican, you have to like, there's like background checks, like your voting history is like investigated.
You have to be a
card carrying to get in there. You have to be like a delegate to get in, and like so I would never get in, but I will be there in an unofficial capacity. So I think I've never been to a convention, so I don't know what's going to happen, but what I assume will happen will be there will be some sort of rallies around the site. I'm assuming there will be a lot of anti-Romney, anti-Republican things. So these things will be put in that context, and or just being in the Republican convention. Kind of like, I won't say a taste of your own medicine in a way, but so we'll see what happens. Yeah, it'll be documented through photography, and yeah.
There seems to be this kind of peripheral approach that you take. You want to be near the source, but not necessarily in it, but close enough to be able to maybe get some kind of residue or some residual.
No, I mean, I'd love to get inside the convention, but I just don't think with my voting record and
that you'd make the cut.
Right, yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, and I'm not trying to go to jail or anything. But
is that where you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, if the project calls for going to jail, I'll do it, but I gotta, yeah, I mean, there's, yeah, you gotta pull back a little bit. I mean,
no, it sounds to me very similar to what you were saying about that kind of in-between space. You know, you were saying,
right, yeah,
almost kind of feeling like not really belonging anywhere in particular, but you kind of inhabit this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say, define it as like a negative, like not belonging anywhere, but I mean, I kind of came to understand it as a positive, almost as a blessing. Like, I don't have to occupy this space or this space. I can kind of occupy any space. And I think that kind of, that thought kind of leads into my practice where I can, let's say, float or move through borders, walls, or which I like. I've come to learn or think of it as a gift, as a way.
Well, you have both, a social practice, and you have a studio practice as well. So I'm interested to know about the relationship between those things, how one feeds the other.
Yeah.
If there is such a thing, how those two kind of realms function for you.
Yeah. Well, I think of the studio kind of like a lab, kind of like a laboratory, or where a lot of the research goes into everything, and the staging, the planning, and plotting. But I think, but a lot of these things happen outside, like in the public or in the real world. Like that's the site of them. But it's the studio is kind of like a space that's, it's like a separation, like where you can come and like block out everything else and think about what you're working on. I don't think you could do that on site. I mean, I think you can, but a lot of these things are very, like, there's a lot of research involved in, in collecting, and so I mean, I think, you need to see what you're doing before. I mean, I think that's just the way I work, that I need to, it has to be planned out, and before you hit, you go and travel to the space, But then, I kind of embrace this idea of chance, because I think, which is something great about working in public space. Like, you really don't know what's going to happen. Like, I have no clue what's going to happen. It could totally bomb. I don't know. But, sometimes amazing things happen. Like with the Gaddafi thing, when I met that boat captain who got me into the safe house, like, I didn't plan that. That was just like chance. And that was like a beautiful thing. And I kind of like embrace that, and just roll with it. I think, but that's just working in public space.
Right.
And it's fun.
Well, I think I totally can relate to that, especially with this project, because so much of it is left up to chance.
Yeah.
And you have no idea.
Right.
Really, what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Necessarily. I mean, we have our outline.
Right.
And kind of the points that we have to touch on, because it is connected to an organization.
Right.
The organization has to be.
Yeah.
Kind of has to uphold particular tenets. Because it is a structure.
Right.
But so much of the process is just kind of about letting it unfold in relation to how our interactions with artists. How these conversations go. So we wanted to build in those very similar elements. So there's a lot of trust. Involved.
I mean, it's
in this.
And it takes a lot to trust. You know what I mean? Like to say, to just walk out on that water. Because yeah, you don't know what's gonna. I mean, you know what's gonna happen, but
right.
yeah,
I mean,
it's anything. Yeah.
Anything could happen. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you
for giving us your time.
Yeah. It's great. Okay. Some elaborating on humor. Humor.
Humor me.
Humor me. I mean, I think it's part of my identity, humor. Like maybe it's part of my upbringing, just being around very, a joking family. But I think I've come to learn that humor is it's a very universal, emotion. Like everybody laughs, everybody, thinks things are funny, I hope. And it's a real, especially in public space, like it's an audience, like I don't want to say you're a stand-up comedian or something, but it is, laughter is, or humor is something that kind of can cut through, and be like a really strong, entry point or gateway to get someone to see something, behind the curtain. You can present humor, and then behind that humor, you can, present a very serious, idea. And I think, I think that's the way I kind of utilize or look at humor. But I think for me, it's just part of who I am. And yeah, it's kind of like a foil to like get, to get someone to look, but then there's something very serious behind that joke, or yeah.
Kind of drops people's defense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Drop your guard, and then, yeah, right hook. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's. I think it's just natural. Like, I want to laugh, and I think about what would make me laugh, or and yeah, I mean serious things can be funny too, or just a way to utilize that, like humor and critique are very. I kind of like occupy this space, like. Very, yeah, I mean, it's a very thin line, I think, and it's a good line to walk on, I think, yeah.